I challenged a human to combat. I'm writing this from the hospital. It was a mistake, a colossal, bone-crunching, pride-shattering mistake. Let me start from the beginning. I recounts, a Thraxian, warrior fearsome, deadly, and respected across 3 systems. My people have conquered planets, toppled empires, and defeated enemies that would make your average being quake in fear. I fought countless battles, and I've always come out on top. So, when I heard of the humans, I thought to myself, how hard could it be? They're just a primitive species. I made a mistake there. It all started during the Great Intergalactic Tournament. Every year, the best warriors from across the galaxy compete for the coveted title of Supreme Champion. It's a grand event, and the winner's glory is sung throughout the stars. This year, however, there was a surprise entry, a human named Trey. Trey wasn't like the other contestants. For one thing, he was small, barely taller than half of my leg. For another, he didn't have the hardened muscles or centuries of battle training that most of us were accustomed to. Trey's weapon of choice was a strange, archaic tool that he called a baseball bat. At first, I thought it was some kind of toy. My people are used to advanced energy weapons, bladed armor, and plasma-infused fists. A baseball bat seemed laughable. So, naturally, I issued a challenge. I, Varcounts, the Thraxian warlord, would fight this human in one-on-one combat. The crowd roared as we stepped into the arena. I flexed my muscles, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. This was going to be over in seconds. A few swift strikes with my claws, a few powerful blows, and I'd have him begging for mercy. It would be a glorious victory, one that would echo through the stars. The crowd would cheer. My name would be immortalized in history. But the human Trey wasn't afraid, not even a little. He stood there, holding his baseball bat with both hands, eyes locked onto me with a strange calm. No fear, no hesitation, just pure focus. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena. Are you ready, contestants? I smirked. I was born ready. Trey didn't say a word. He just raised his bat and nodded. The bell rang. The combat began. I charged, moving faster than light itself, my claws extended and ready to slice through his fragile body. But Trey didn't flinch. At the last possible moment, he swung his bat, not in an attempt to block, but in an unpredictable, wild arc. I didn't see it coming. The bat collided with my face with a crack. My vision blurred. My nose, my cheekbone, my jaw, all of them shattered in a single blow. Pain surged through me like a wave of fire. My knees buckled, and I collapsed to the ground, my body unable to keep up with the shock. I tried to rise, but my legs wouldn't obey. Blood poured from my broken face, dripping onto the arena floor. The crowd fell silent. The announcer hesitated, then spoke. Victory, Trey, the human. I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. I was supposed to be invincible. I was supposed to destroy this human, not be destroyed by him. But there it was, a simple, unassuming human had beaten me soundly. Nah, here I am, in the hospital, surrounded by healing pods and medical droids. My pride is shattered, my body mangled, and my reputation in tatters. I can't even look at my reflection without cringing. I'll never forget that moment, the moment a human taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Sometimes, strength isn't just about size, power, or centuries of experience. It's about the heart, the courage, and the will to fight, no matter the odds. Next time, I'll be more careful when I challenge someone, and next time, I won't underestimate a human. But for now, I'm just trying to survive. I challenged a human to combat. I'm writing this from the hospital part 2. I spent 3 weeks in the medical bay, staring at the sterile white walls of my recovery pod. My bones healed, my face was reconstructed, and I even regained a fraction of my former glory town, not without a heavy dose of humiliation. The most ironic part, I was still being treated by humans, not just any humans, though, the very same kind of human I had underestimated. It felt like a constant reminder that I wasn't the predator I once thought myself to be. The healer who worked on me was a woman named Dr. Leela, a human physician with hands that seemed too small and soft to perform surgery on someone like me. But she did. She patched me up, not with the cold precision of a Thraxian war medic, but with a kind of careful care that was foreign to me. Every time I saw her, I couldn't help but feel both grateful and ashamed. "You're lucky," she told me one day as she adjusted a sensor on my chest. "You Thraxians may be big and strong, but you're not invincible." I didn't reply. What could I say? I'd been the one who challenged him. I'd been the one who lost. Eventually, I was allowed to leave the medical facility, but I wasn't quite ready to face the world. Not yet. The sting of defeat still hung heavily around me, like a cloud I couldn't shake off. But then, a message arrived. It was from Trey. The last time I saw him, he had been standing over my beaten body, holding that ridiculous baseball bat like it was an ancient weapon of myth. I had never expected him to even acknowledge my existence after the fight. But now, here I was, reading a message that I could hardly believe. "Hey, Varcounts, I heard you're out of the hospital. Listen, I've got some free time, and I thought maybe you'd want to train with me." I blinked. Train with me? I read the message again. Train with me? Was he mocking me, trying to make me feel worse? But no, as I read through the message again, I realize there was something genuine in it. Trey didn't seem like the kind of person who would gloat over a win. If anything, he seemed like he wanted to help. And that confused me. The warrior in me was furious. I didn't need his help. I was Varcounts, a Thraxian warrior, but the part of me that was starting to realize just how much I had to learn, that part was curious. So I responded, "All right, human, I'll train with you, but know this: next time we fight, I will win." The reply came almost instantly. "Looking forward to it. I'll bring the bat." The training sessions with Trey were unlike anything I had ever imagined. At first, I thought I was simply humoring him. The idea of training with a human was laughable. I was supposed to be the teacher, not the student. But as the days went on, I found myself learning more than I ever expected. Trey didn't teach me how to swing a bat. He didn't need to. What he taught me was how to think on my feet, how to anticipate attacks not just with brute strength, but with strategy. He didn't fight like a warrior. He fought like a survivor. Every time I threw a punch or made an advance, he was there, always one step ahead, always thinking 2 moves ahead. It was maddening. Every time I thought I had him, he dodged. Every time I thought I was in control, he took control. It was like fighting against a force of nature. And slowly, I began to realize something else. Trey wasn't just teaching me how to fight, he was teaching me how to lose and still keep going. He was showing me the value of persistence, of adapting and improving. He never gloated, he never taunted me, he just taught. The day finally came when I felt ready for another match. It was just the two of us, alone in a secluded arena, far from the spotlight. No crowds, no noise, just us. We stood facing each other, and for the first time, I wasn't sure who would win. I was different now, stronger in ways I hadn't anticipated. I had learned to trust my instincts more, to adapt faster, and to think more clearly. I wasn't just using my raw power anymore, I was using my mind. Trey nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You ready?" I grinned. "This time, I won't underestimate you." The match began. This time, there was no sense of overconfidence on my part. I knew better now. I moved faster, thinking through every move, and Trey mirrored my every step, blocking, dodging, and countering in ways that made my head spin. But something was different. This time, I could keep up. This time, I wasn't just throwing punches, he was throwing them with purpose. We clashed, again and again, each of us pushing the other to our limits, and in the end, it was clear. I wasn't the same warrior who had challenged him months ago. I was stronger, smarter. The match ended in a draw. We both stood, panting, covered in sweat and bruises. Neither of us could claim victory, but neither of us had truly lost, either. Trey gave me a nod of approval. "Good fight, Varcounts. You've come a long way." I stood there, feeling something I hadn't felt in, I guess, pride. True pride, not in my strength, but in how far I had come. And for the first time since that humiliating defeat, I realized something important. Maybe the greatest victory wasn't about beating the other opponent. It was about overcoming your own weaknesses. "Next time," I said, panting, "I'll win." Trey smiled. "We'll see." And for the first time, I knew the next battle would be different. The days passed, and my training with Trey became a routine. We would meet almost every week, sparring and learning from each other. It wasn't just about physical prowess anymore. It was about mental fortitude, patience, and strategy. Trey and I had become something unexpected partners in a way. Sure, I still respected the way my Thraxian instincts could crush a foe when necessary, but I also came to appreciate how Trey thought. He never rushed into things. He never lost his cool, even when faced with impossible odds. And I found myself wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was something more to humanity than I had initially believed. But my thoughts on humanity were about to be put to the test again. It all started when a new challenger arrived in the galaxy. An unknown race of mercenaries, calling themselves the Verlith, appeared out of nowhere. They came from a distant, uncharted system and laid waste to several smaller colonies along the fringes of our galaxy. Their strength was unparalleled. Every warlord I spoke to warned of their power, and soon they became a threat we could no longer ignore. A council meeting was called. The leaders of every major faction in the galaxy gathered, hoping to strategize against this new enemy. As usual, I was chosen as the Thraxian representative, and as usual, I knew that my warriors and I would be called to the front lines of any battle. But something strange happened during that meeting. One by one, each faction's leader spoke of the Verlith's overwhelming power, their near impenetrable armor, their unparalleled combat skills. It wasn't until Trey, of all people, stood up that anyone took notice. "Maybe we don't need to fight them the way we always fight," Trey said, standing confidently in front of the assembly. Everyone turned to stare at him, clearly puzzled. "Human, you must be joking," one of the warlords hissed, his massive form towering over everyone. "The Verlith don't respond to negotiation, they only respect power." Trey smiled. "Well, maybe they respect something different. Why don't we test that?" The room went silent. For a moment, I thought I might have imagined it. Trey, this human, standing in front of the galaxy's most powerful warlords, suggesting we negotiate with a race that only knew violence. "What do you mean, human?" another leader asked, his tone skeptical but curious. Trey stepped forward, his voice firm. "I think it's time we show them a new kind of strength. Maybe it's not about being bigger or stronger. Maybe it's about unifying, about showing them that there's more than one way to win a war." It was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard, and yet, I couldn't help but listen. I had to admit, there was something magnetic about Trey's words. The other warlords clearly weren't as convinced as I was, but they humored him, and before long, it was decided we would send a message to the Verlith, not through brute force, but through a challenge. A challenge to single combat. The day of the duel arrived. The Verlith had agreed, somewhat reluctantly, to send one of their champions to face us in one-on-one combat. Naturally, I was selected to represent our side. My reputation as a warrior, combined with my recent training, made me the obvious choice. As I stood on the battlefield, waiting for the Verlith champion to appear, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. We weren't just fighting for ourselves anymore. We were fighting for the future of the galaxy. If I lost, it might signal the fall of every faction here, and the end of any kind of peace. The ground trembled as the Verlith warrior stepped into the arena. He was massive, towering, armored from head to toe in black, spiked plating that seemed to absorb the light. His armor was nearly impenetrable. His weapon was a massive, energy-infused axe that crackled with power. It was everything I feared and more. But there was one thing he didn't have. He didn't have Trey. Trey stood at the sidelines, watching with calm eyes, his expression unreadable. It wasn't about the fight anymore. It was about the message we were sending. The Verlith needed to understand that we weren't just a collection of warring factions. We were united. The bell rang. The fight began. The Verlith champion charged at me with terrifying speed, swinging his axe with enough force to cleave a mountain in half. I barely managed to dodge, feeling the rush of air as it passed inches from my head. His strength was beyond anything I had encountered, but I had learned it from my mistakes. This time, I was ready. I moved swiftly, using everything I had learned from Trith's unpredictable strikes, the feints, the sudden shifts in position. The Verlith warrior was strong, yes, but his movements were predictable. He relied too much on sheer force. I didn't. We clashed over and over, each blow reverberating through the ground. The Verlith champion's axe missed me several times, each swing growing more desperate. I could feel my body tiring, but I was relentless. The longer we fought, the more I realized that this wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a test of resolve. In a sudden, fluid motion, I ducked under one of his attacks and caught his arm in a hold. I twisted it violently, using his momentum to flip him onto the ground. The crowd gasped, but I wasn't done. I grabbed his axe, using it against him, and in one swift motion, I disarmed him. The Verlith champion lay defeated, his body pinned to the ground beneath my boot. It was over. The crowd erupted into applause, but I barely heard it. I was too busy catching my breath, feeling the adrenaline that still coursed through my veins. But there was no time to bask in glory. The message had been sent. We had won, not just because I was stronger, but because we were united in our purpose. And through it all, I glanced over at Trey, who was smiling at me, not with smugness, but with quiet pride. I had learned something that day. It wasn't just about the strength to defeat an enemy. It was about the strength to change the way you fight, to embrace new ideas, and to see potential where others saw only weakness. The Verlith had come for conquest, but what they hadn't counted on was humanity's gift, the power to bring people together, to find a different way to win. And it had saved us all. The galaxy was still reeling from the aftermath of the duel with the Verlith. Our victory in single combat wasn't just a win, it was a statement. We hadn't just beaten them physically, we had shown that there was more to power than just strength. The Verlith, who had once thought of themselves as an unstoppable force, had been defeated by the very thing they had overlooked, unity and strategy. But even after our triumph, things didn't settle as easily as I had hoped. The news spread quickly. Every faction, every system, had heard of the battle. Some celebrated, some were cautious, and some still feared the Verlith's true strength. But there was one particular group that wasn't happy with how things turned out. Urdov, another warrior race that had been watching the duel with keen interest. The Urdov were known for their brutality and pride. They had long been the top predators in their part of the galaxy, and their warriors had never known defeat. They looked down on the concept of unity in battle, preferring instead the raw power of individual combat. In their eyes, what had happened with the Verlith was a fluke, a dishonorable act. I first heard about them when a message arrived, not from the council, but from Rock, the Urdov champion, who was infamous for his savage tactics and his refusal to ever surrender. He had issued a challenge. A personal challenge. He wanted me. I, Rock of the Urdov, challenge you, Varcounts of the Thraxians, to combat. No tricks, no games, just you and me, one-on-one. If you refuse, you'll prove your people are nothing but cowards. I read the message 3 times before I even reacted. A challenge from Rock, to me. I didn't hesitate. I knew what I had to do. I had faced the Verlith, and now I had to face this. The Urdov had always been a threat, but it wasn't just about proving my strength anymore. It was about proving to the galaxy, and to myself, that what we had built wasn't just some passing victory, it was something real, something worth fighting for. I stood before the council again, in front of the same warlords and leaders who had gathered months before, but this time, the atmosphere was different. The room was tense. Rock's challenge had thrown everything into uncertainty. Some leaders were whispering about tactics, others worried about the reputation of their own warriors. But Trey was there, standing next to me. His expression was as calm as always, but there was something else in his eyes, a quiet understanding. He knew what I was about to face. He knew the stakes. Varcounts, he said quietly, you don't have to do this. You've proven yourself already. You've already beaten the best. I shook my head. I have to do this. This is bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us. If I refuse, the Urdov will think they can walk all over us. Trey nodded, but there was a flicker of worry in his gaze. Just remember, winning isn't always about strength. It's about the strength to keep going, no matter what. I had learned that lesson the hard way, but hearing it from Trey now, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The next day, I boarded the shuttle that would take me to the neutral combat zone where Rocco waited. As I stood there, preparing for the inevitable, I couldn't help but think of everything I had learned about myself, about humanity, about strength. When I arrived at the arena, The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The Erdef were known for their brutal, no-holds-barred fighting style, and Rock was their champion. There would be no rules, no mercy. This was going to be a fight to the death. I stepped into the arena, my heart pounding in my chest, and then I saw him. Rock stood at the center of the arena, his massive form outlined against the dark sky. His armor was jagged and spiked, like the teeth of some ancient beast. His weapon was a massive double-headed axe, gleaming with an eerie red glow. He looked every bit the part of the ruthless predator he was known to be. He didn't speak, didn't taunt me, he simply raised his weapon, a silent declaration of war. The crowd roared. This was a battle that would be remembered. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Trey's words echoed in my mind, strength to keep going. The bell rang, and Rock charged. His speed was unbelievable. He moved like a storm, swinging his axe with all the fury of a star's collapse. I barely managed to block the first swing, the force of it knocking me off balance, but I wasn't going to make the same mistake as I did with the Verlith. This time, I wouldn't rely only on my strength. I would rely on my mind, on the lessons I had learned. I dodged, countered, and found my rhythm. Rock's strikes were powerful, but they were predictable. The Erdef fought with pure aggression, with no care for defense. Every time he swung, he left an opening, and every time he did, I took advantage. But Rock wasn't easy. His strikes became more ferocious, his movements more unpredictable. He was relentless. It felt like fighting a living avalanche. For a moment, I thought I wouldn't survive. My body was bruised, my muscles aching, and Rock's attacks were wearing me down. I saw my chance, though. His massive axe swung in a wide arc, and I ducked under it, closing the gap between us. In that split second, I acted. I grabbed his wrist and used his own momentum against him, twisting his arm and throwing him off balance. He fell to the ground with a roar, his axe skidding across the arena floor. I didn't give him a chance to recover. I moved fast, precise, and in that moment, everything I had learned from Trey, every lesson, every strategy, every instinct came together. With one final strike, I knocked Rock to the ground and pinned him, holding his own weapon to his throat. The arena fell silent. I stood there, breathing heavily, my heart racing, as the crowd processed what had just happened. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. I had done it. I had beaten the Erdith champion. But it wasn't just me who had won. It was the strength of everything I had learned of unity, of perseverance, and of the courage to keep fighting when everything seemed lost. I looked at Rock, who stared up at me with eyes that burned with rage, but I didn't take pleasure in his defeat. Instead, I offered him the only thing that truly mattered: respect.